Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Apologies for missing last week. It took a sort of last-minute trip down to Austin, Texas. But I am back for a big weekend here. It is the weekend of May 18th through the 20th. The numbers came in this morning, so we will do our normal weekend show. I will walk through the top 10, do some really deep dives in the new openers, especially Deadpool 2, because it was such a big opening, and people are really excited about it, and talk a little bit about the other new wide release openers, as well as the top 10, maybe touch upon some limited releases that are out there, and then queue up what is going to be coming out over the next few weeks, especially next weekend we have Solo. So in any event, let's dive right in the top 10. Coming in at number 1, of course, is Deadpool 2, although it's lower than what people had expected. I mean, just to keep in mind that tracking coming into this weekend was looking like, I think it was 150. I have to check my notes. Yeah, it was 150. The reality here is, and we don't really know how accurate this Sunday estimate is here. Fox is saying that it'll do a little bit more and hit 125. The other people in the industry are saying it's Sunday is going to be a little bit worse, and it'll probably hit 122, 123 for the 3-day total. So a little bit of disagreement about how it's going to do today. But it's a good opening. It's nothing to really sort of be upset about or disappointed in. It's $25 million off of tracking. And if tracking in recent times has more than anything under predicted, right? You look at Black Panther, it was off like $40 million under. You look at Avengers Infinity War, similar, about $30 million off, sort of under predicting what these big comic book movies are going to do. So with Deadpool hitting 150 with the tracking, the thought process there amongst us nerds and probably analysts as well was that tracking's probably not capturing everybody. Therefore, we should expect at least 150, maybe 160, 170. That didn't happen. So we need to sort of do a little bit of a deep dive here and figure out it's not necessarily what went wrong, is why didn't it repeat? It didn't even hit what the original hit, which was like, I think 132, which of course was one of the biggest surprises ever in box office history. When Deadpool, it was a debate for like 6 to 7 months before Deadpool was coming out. This would be February, 2016? And we had just gone through this really strange lull in good comic book movies. Ant-Man had come out the summer before, and it did all right, opened in the 50s, closed out about $180 million, but nowhere near what other MCU films were doing. It wasn't like an Avengers movie where it breaks 200 opening weekend and does $400, $500, $600 million domestically. So Ant-Man was a little bit of a quieter comic book movie film that came out the summer of 2015. Then you had F4, which was an unmitigated disaster, and kind of felt like, wow, like one of the biggest misses in the genre of the last 20, 30 years. And it's like that whole franchise, of course, we think it has to be cursed, right? Fantastic Four just has to be a cursed property. I don't know why that is. It was a huge running joke in Arrested Development season 4, which came out like 5 years ago, that Fantastic Four is a cursed IP. I don't know why it is. No one knows why. No one's ever made a good Fantastic Four movie. Even the ones that came out in the mid 2000s were terrible. And as someone who's a little bit sort of, let's say, cynical and critical of comic book movie films, the Fantastic Four films are trash, objective trash, and I don't think anybody can argue any different. And F4 was the worst of those. So we were in that environment. Like, F4 had completely flopped in August, and then there was nothing. It was crickets in the comic book movie world until Deadpool was coming out that February. Never before had a comic book movie opened up in February like that. Of course, we have Black Panther this year that sort of blew all concept of what summer movie season really is out of the water. But back then, that Deadpool had not opened to 130. The expectation was that Deadpool would open. No one had any clue. If you go back in time, you look at the forums, you look at what the industry is saying. No one had any clue what Deadpool was going to do. And the marketing was fantastic. It was interesting. I was very much on the naysayer side. I was thinking like it was going to open at like $50 million just because it was February, unproven character, kind of a side character that outside the comic book world, people didn't really know very well. Despite the fact that it had Ryan Reynolds and this really cool story behind the production of the film. And remember some of that stuff leaked, like the sort of test footage leaked, which I think was all a PR ploy, like a year or 2 years before that. It felt interesting and special, but it didn't feel like it was going to break the basic laws of the box office, and it smashed them. It opened up at like 132, right in that range, and reconfigured how we thought about February, how we thought about the winter season, how we thought about Valentine's Day as a box office holiday, and how we thought about comic book movies in general. It was a hard R comic book movie that opened to over $130 million its opening weekend. Really one of the biggest stories of 2016. I think changed the genre completely, almost instantaneously. Remember later that year, Suicide Squad comes out. They recut parts of that movie to make it more like Deadpool because Deadpool had done so well. And I think those cuts probably helped out Suicide Squad more. They made it more playful, a lot more rock music up front, a little more sort of vivacious and playful and ironic, as opposed to the sort of DCEU, really Zack Snyder style of watching paint dry on a wall and everybody brooding. So Deadpool was a really big deal. And so when the sequel obviously there was going to be a sequel. There was some production trouble. Tim Miller left, who was the director in the first one. Ryan Reynolds it's really Ryan Reynolds' project, I think you could say, along with Tim Miller back then. But I think Ryan Reynolds may have been a bigger driver in making sure that movie actually happened. And let's not forget the production budget for the original Deadpool was only $40 million, which is, a fourth of what a normal comic book movie costs to make. So it was an amazing performance. Obviously, there was going to be a sequel, a little bit of production trouble going in. There were rumors a few months ago or like 2 months ago that the quality in Deadpool 2 was not great. But here we are. So it opens at a 125, massive opening, by the way, in 4,350 theaters throughout North America. Per theater average was only 28,000, almost 29,000 per theater, which is significantly lower than the original. And I think that's one thing, trying to figure out how is this performance? Why did it not hit 150, what tracking was saying? Because in most cases, movies like this go way over tracking if they're hyped. I think if you look at sort of the common patterns that we see with movies like this, number one, it's a sequel, right? So it's going to be front-loaded to some degree. Its preview number Thursday night was 18.6 billion, the biggest preview number, 18.6 million, the biggest preview number ever for a rated R film, right? So that's one thing to think about, like, wow, amazing. The original Deadpool only did 12.7 on its preview. So it bested that in a single night by $6 million. That's a massive improvement. So when we were looking at the numbers Friday morning, we see that number come in, waiting on the Friday matinees to see what's going to happen. It looked like it was easily going to surpass the original Deadpool, and it ended up coming not like a huge gap between Deadpool 2 and Deadpool 1, but a significant gap. And it's less in the aggregate, the 125 versus 133. The bigger problem to me, or issue or conflict here, or difference, I should say, I don't want to put this too negatively because it's not a bad performance. It's just a different performance than Deadpool. Is that per theater average of only $28,000, almost $29,000. Deadpool 1 had a fantastic per theater average of, I believe, if I can find it, $37,000 per theater. An almost $10,000 difference. And per theater averages are very specific. If you're off 1,000, it can make a massive, huge difference. So that 10,000 gap is actually very significant, and it speaks a lot more than that 125 versus 133. That's only it's only $7 million off. We'll see what the actuals come in. It's probably going to be more about like $10 million off in sort of its aggregate 3-day total versus the original. I would be much more concerned about that per theater average if I was Fox. Look, it's going to be profitable. There's no doubt about it. Once you get all the TV stuff, the digital, the DVD sales, it's going to make quite a lot of money. But the fact that its per theater average dropped 10K almost, I don't even know how to interpret that really, because it's a sequel to a movie that is really beloved. People love Deadpool. Super excited about this sequel. I think it pops off on Thursday, and then sort of what happens? You know, if you look at it at a day-by-day comparison here with the original Deadpool, the Friday includes the Thursday previews. The Friday's better, right? $53 million for Deadpool 2 versus 47 for Deadpool 1. Saturday is where it starts to make a bigger difference. If you were just extrapolating on what happened Thursday night, what happened Friday, you would expect Deadpool 2 to do at least $45 million on the Saturday. It only does 40 versus Deadpool 1's 42. So that's where they start to diverge. And what does that suggest? Pretty extreme front loading. That is, the people who wanted to go see it went to go see it Thursday night and Friday. By the time Saturday rolls around, that excitement and hype did not expand out as they thought it was going to with general audiences. The estimate for Sunday is going to be 31. And another big factor here that Deadline brought up is that Deadpool 1 opened up on a holiday, not only Valentine's Day, but I think President's Day was also that weekend. So it had 4 days. So the Sunday number for Deadpool 1 was $42 million. It stayed flat with Saturday. When's the last time you saw that? Deadpool 2 here doesn't have that advantage. There's no holiday tomorrow. So they're estimating only 31. Some people are saying maybe 29. So there's a lot of differences between the two movies, obviously. It opened in a very different environment back then. And a very different, despite the fact we're only 2 months, are we 2 months removed? 3 months removed from February. Very different world. We're in summer movie season. We're not in Valentine's Day. It's not winter. It's summer. It's 85 degrees here in Tennessee. So it feels like summer. So it's just a very different environment. But that all being said, the opening for Deadpool is depressed for some reason. It's lower than it probably should be. Thinking about making this movie, it cost $110 million to make. The marketing budget alone in the United States probably approaches $60 million, I would say. Worldwide, you're looking at like probably $120 million just to market the thing. And like I said before, I don't think that there's going to be any issue making $100 million, maybe $200 million profit on this film. What I find interesting is that the gap is so big between the first and the second one in terms of that per theater average. And what that suggests to me is it's not just front loading that's causing that, because if it was front loading, like if it was true front loading in the traditional sense, what we would probably see is a similar per theater average and then a massive drop next weekend. What it suggests to me, an opening weekend, if this Deadpool 2 is off that much on its per theater average, what it's suggesting to me is that the original had this sort of lightning in a bottle moment where it was just the right marketing at the right time, at the right release date, on the right holiday coming up, that everybody had to go see that movie. Everybody being men, women, old, young, every race you could possibly imagine. That was sort of the hype for that original Deadpool. The second one doesn't really have that same level of hype, and I don't know why. I thought it was going to easily open to 150 when I saw the tracking come in. I thought 160, 170 was actually pretty likely. The fact that it dropped off so much just suggests that like maybe there's some, I don't want to say it, I don't want to say comic book movie fatigue because I'll get my head cut off by somebody. I'm not going to say that. I don't think that's necessarily it. I think there might just be a blockbuster fatigue thing going on. Avengers Infinity War only came out like not even up just about a month ago. And that was one of the biggest openings ever. It was the biggest opening ever. I don't know what I'm talking about. It was the biggest opening of all time. And we're only a month out. And it just maybe that movie coming first kind of took the edge off of Deadpool 2 a bit. What I mean by that is like the hype just didn't get to the frenzied pace because we just went through that. Whereas even with like Black Panther, the hype was insane for that movie. I felt like everybody had to go see it opening weekend, and the numbers reflected that. We had that, that was February, that was 3 months ago. Then we had Avengers. Deadpool just coming a month later. Maybe it was just, it's in too busy of a season right now for it. A lot of people were saying online, amongst the nerds, that why did this not get pushed to August? Because August, for whatever reason these days, the movie industry is leaving August wide open. I had multiple shows about this last year, about the great box office crash of 2017, which was mostly August. No, there was no real major films, big blockbuster films like a Deadpool or an Avengers or anything like that scheduled for that August, and no one showed up. Right, and it was just a huge, massive loss, one of the biggest losses ever for a month in the box office in recent times. There's a big question, why didn't Deadpool 2 get pushed to August? Because here's the problem. Avengers just came out a month ago, did fantastic. Deadpool 2, another comic book movie a month later, okay, like that's pretty tight. The big problem is Solo's coming out next week. And so you have MCU versus Fox versus their biggest properties versus fucking Star Wars next weekend. I don't know how Deadpool is gonna really fare. It's so busy. It's just so jam-packed. And I feel like that's one reason why Deadpool 2 was depressed a bit. And just like, let's take a look at like, before I dive too much deeper into it, 83% in Rotten Tomatoes, an A cinema score. There's no quality problems here. And I don't want to think that like 125 is a bad opening. It's not a bad opening. Fox is going to print money on this movie. But comparatively to the original Deadpool and just what tracking was saying, there's a huge gap here. And so I want to kind of figure out why that is. So great. I actually just came from Deadpool 2 like an hour ago. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to do a personal review on it. I probably will later. It'll just slip out. 86% audience score for Deadpool 2. The people that are seeing it are loving it. They're absolutely loving it. So that's not an issue. Breakdown of the audience, 61% was male this weekend, 39% was female. If you compare that to the average film of all tickets sold, it's actually right down the middle, usually 50-50. So skewed way male in this case. Over 25 was 62%, under 25 was 38%. That falls in line with the normal index for a film. Slightly skewed a little bit younger, which is surprising because of the rated R aspect of it, because anybody under 17 technically can't get in without a parent, right? So that was a little bit surprising that it skewed a little bit younger than sort of the average for a film or most movies. The one standout thing that I saw in terms of like the racial breakdown, white was 50%, Latino was 20%, African American was 13%, Asian was 13%. Now, it under-indexed on sort of the average. This is for the average movie over every single movie in 2017. This is the average, 55% white. So a little bit less Caucasian, a little bit less Latino. Normally, it should be about 23% for the average movie. African American was right in line. Really over-indexed on Asian Americans, Deadpool 2. For a normal movie, 7%. This is almost double that at 13%. So that I find that fascinating. Why is it over-indexing so much with Asian Americans? I have no idea why that would be the case, but I got to throw that out there. And I wonder how they classify people as Asian American, because I imagine that they would lump people from India as sort of South Asian. So maybe because of the characters involved, that there was a little bit more of an Indian American audience, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. But nothing in that sort of indicates any sort of reason why it did not perform up to expectations here. And that's really what I'm saying. It performed well, but not up to expectations. It just took me like 30 minutes to get those words out of my mouth. In the West, American West, it was over-indexing. I'm sure Canada West too, Vancouver. Midwest and South Central, I'm assuming South Central is like Texas, slightly over-indexed. Did not perform to index in the Northeast and Southeast, so a little bit depressed numbers there. If I have to take a step back, why did this not perform to expectations? Give me a fucking conclusion instead of me rambling. I would say that the fact that it wasn't on a holiday played a big role. The Sunday is going to be 10 million less than the original Deadpool. That's a massive reason why. You had the royal wedding that might have something to do with that, although I think that'll play a bigger factor in the second movie we're going to talk about, Book Club. The original release date was early June, which I think would have been better for this. I think one of the bigger reasons that I'm seeing that this is not performing well is what I talked about. It's too busy. It's too soon after Avengers Infinity War. This is a big fear talking about these release dates, even 6 months ago, 3 months ago when they changed. It's just there's too much cross traffic and the audiences are cannibalizing each other. And we'll see that in the Avengers Infinity War number when we get to it. That all being said, second highest rated R opening of all time, second best opening ever for Fox. Obviously both are second to Deadpool. I think it was the original was lightning in the bottle a little bit, had really perfect timing. I think Deadpool 2, I don't know. We'll have to keep watching. I don't really have a clear answer. There's a couple of different reasons out there that I stated that could be the reason why this is underperforming to expectations. Maybe tracking just got out of whack. Fox was tracking in at 130, but you remember the studios are super conservative. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're tracking at 130 and it comes in at 125." They would never do that. If it comes in at 125, I guarantee you Fox would have said, "We're tracking at 110, 100." They always want that PR push or bump on Monday saying, "Oh, it went beyond our expectations." That's just the sort of the routine for movie PR companies or teams. So something happened. Something didn't go right. Something did not perform the way it should have. I'm not sure what it is. And the only way we're going to figure that out is by keeping track of the film and see how it does. If it has a massive drop next weekend with Solo, and it could, maybe it just there wasn't the same appetite as there was for the original one. I mean, the original had a great multiplier too. So we'll see this one goes. My expectation for Deadpool 2 is obviously it's going to make a lot of money, but it's going to be it feels already like it's going to be a little bit of an underwhelming performance. Maybe it plays strong throughout June and the summer. I don't know though. I just don't see that happening. So Deadpool 2 is number one at $25 million. That was my deep dive on that. Coming in at number two, a movie I mentioned a lot, Avengers Infinity War, $28.6 million, a 54% drop. Pretty high drop for a fourth weekend. Lost about 500 theaters. Per theater average was 7,164, which is pretty healthy. It's just about to break $600 million. That drop was expected to be almost a little bit higher when the Friday number came in, which was so low. I think what you have here is just, it's what I stated before. It's too busy. Deadpool 2 and Avengers have a huge crossover audience. And the people who already saw Avengers aren't going to see it again. They're going to go see Deadpool 2, right? And so that's one of the reasons why Avengers dropped so much. Who knows what Solo's going to do next weekend? I think tracking it's like 130 to 170, somewhere in that range. That's going to decimate these films. I feel like there's crossover audiences. It was not a smart move by Disney. These are all Disney films at the end of the day. I'm sure Fox will end up being a part of Disney. I think that's going to happen unless antitrust comes into play. But Avengers did not perform well this weekend, and you could say goodbye to $700 million. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to beat Black Panther either. And whatever. Does it really matter that much? Not really, but it was interesting to think that, oh my God, it's the biggest opening ever. It's not even going to come close to Force Awakens at the end of the day. And that just goes to show you, it's super front-loaded. It's going to have a multiplier not even near Force Awakens. Just a different type of film, right? And I think the victory laps that people were doing on its opening weekend were a little bit premature. Look, it did have the biggest opening of all time. That's amazing. That's cool. But it's not going to make... It's going to be like 200 million less at least than Force Awakens. So, whatever. Avengers won the battle, but I think Force Awakens and Disney wins the war. That's essentially what it comes down to. Disney does nothing but win. They can't lose. They have a stacked deck is what it comes down to. But not a good number for Avengers in terms of what it was doing before. It's a pretty hefty drop. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see how. I really want to see how Solo affects these movies. Like, is Deadpool gonna have like a 56% drop in its second weekend? It's possible. I don't know. Anything else I want to talk about these movies? No, that's good. Number 3, Book Club coming in at 12.5 million. It was tracking at 9 to 10, so definitely overperformed its tracking. The Royal Wedding absolutely depressed this film. I mean, the Royal Wedding, hell, I watched the Royal Wedding and I couldn't give two shits about it. It was just everywhere on TV and on the internet and on Twitter. You couldn't escape it. So it's that audience that would watch the Royal Wedding instead of going to see this movie. So keep that in mind. 12.5 million opened 2,800 theaters about. So a wide opening, but not a traditional wide opening. Usually they go over 3,000. Per theater average was about 4,500 bucks per theater. Audience on this one way over indexed female, 80 to 20 female to male ratio. Way over indexed on age, 88% was over 35, which this all makes perfect sense, right? You could see this coming from a mile away. I actually did not take a look at the reviews on this one. I thought they were not good. Book Club got an A- cinema score, 58% in Rotten Tomatoes. Let's take a look at the audience score just for fun. 61% audience score, also not very good. That doesn't really match up with the cinema score. I see a cinema score of A-. I feel like an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes should be like an 80 something. It's 61. So there's these measurements sometimes just don't line up. But I think the good news, there's like a lot of good news for Book Club. One, it had a great opening, 12.5 million. I think the even better news is that was a little bit depressed because of the Royal Wedding, and I feel like the multiplier here is going to be well over 3. My guess is Deadpool called out a couple of comparables. Going in Style had a 3.78 multiplier, and then Walk in the Woods had a 3.6. I feel like it's going to at least hit that, right? Let's assume something crazy like a 3.7, like Going in Style. That one might have been a little bit special. I don't know. Zach Braff can be a really good filmmaker. And like, I thought that was one of his better films that he's ever done. It wasn't like about sad sap, mid-20s, mid-30s-year-old or something like that. It was a whole new sort of world for him. And I think he did really well. And that's why it played really. I think people really enjoyed that film. All ages could enjoy that film. This one, it's going to skew old, right? But let's just assume it has a similar multiplier as Going in Style, which I certainly think is possible, mostly because it had a depressed weekend. So 12.5 times 3.7, mental math, yeah, right. 46.2 million. My gut says it's going to hit 50. I feel like it's going to have a great multiplier, which is a really good performance for this. You don't see movies like this perform this well very often. There was a lot of buzz on pre-orders for this. Pre-orders were off the charts. That's why they sort of called it at 12.5. I think this Sunday is going to play really well for this movie. But a good performance, but that we'll keep a track of that one as well. But I expect it to hit 50 million bucks would be my projection. Okay, number 4. Last weekend I did not talk about this movie, Life of the Party. What do I have to say about this movie? It did $7.7 million this weekend, 57% drop. In about 3,600 theaters. Per theater average was not great for its second weekend, $2,113 to be exact. Total take so far for Life of the Party was 31 million bucks. I called that this wasn't going to do well. The marketing was terrible. The trailers didn't really make a lot of sense. The movie doesn't really make a lot of sense. Just in a very like, I remember seeing the trailer and I was like, okay, she's going back to college, getting divorced, going back to college. Why is she leaving with her daughter at college? I don't know. It made zero sense to me as like someone who studied writing and stuff like that and is obsessed with movies and scripts. It just didn't really line up to me and didn't really connect with audiences either. 31 million bucks for a movie like this is not horrific. But that drop suggests people did not like this movie. What is it on Rotten Tomatoes? I don't even see. 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. Awful. Of course, critics are like me. Like, they're super cynical, like eggheads. And if it's something that's not written well, it doesn't make sense, they're gonna dock it. I'll tell you that much. 49% audience score. Oh, that is rough. B cinema score. That's also terrible. Yeah, I mean, people didn't like it. It's not a good movie. I mean, it's essentially what it comes down to. And if it's not a good movie, the word gets out, and it's going to have a 57% drop in its second weekend. Okay, that was Life of the Party. I don't want to talk about that one anymore. Breaking In. Look at me. I got egg on my face for Breaking In. I thought it was going to be this big hit from Universal. I love the marketing for Breaking In. I thought it was such an interesting, sort of fascinating... it's a genre flick. It's a B movie, but I thought it looked like it was hammy enough where it would be entertaining to see. It just has not played very well at all. $6.5 million this weekend, a 63% drop. Oh, that is terrible. That's so bad. It was only made for $6 million. Is this Blumhouse too? I feel like it's Universal, but I feel like it's got Blumhouse written all over it. It doesn't say Blumhouse. No, I don't see it. Weird. Feels like a Blumhouse movie to me. 63% drop. Per theater average $2,500 per theater this weekend, second weekend. Total take so far just under Life of Party at $28.7 million. I was wrong about that one. I thought it was going to do better. It'll probably do okay in terms of financially. It only cost $6 million to make. It's probably going to do really well on VOD, I would imagine. It's one of those movies that you would just like, I'm bored. I want to see a movie. Oh, let's see this. But didn't really break out at all. Kind of had a very middling performance, even when you take into account the super low production budget. I just thought it was going to break out a lot more. Number 6 was Show Dogs from Global Road, $6 million, 3,200 theaters this weekend, $1,800 per theater average. Terrible opening. I don't know anything about this movie. I don't know who was involved. I think Will Arnett was a voice in it, wasn't he? Yeah. It's live action? I thought it was animated. Obviously, I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. I don't want to talk about this movie. I don't find it interesting. I don't think there's anything really to comment on it. It was a stupid movie to release and to make. I don't know what they were thinking. But my question is, who is Global Road? How do I not know that company? All time. Oh, they put out Midnight Sun back in March, which had Bella Thorne and Patrick Schwarzenegger and Rob Riggle. I talked about that one briefly when it came out. Also kind of a flop. It sounds like a new distribution or production arm that doesn't really know what they're doing yet. Maybe they will eventually get it. Reminds me of like Entertainment Studios. It's like, who are these people? Number 7 this weekend was Overboard. 4.7 million, 52% drop, which is okay. Lost 186 theaters. It's still in 1,800 theaters. Per theater average is not that bad for a third weekend for a movie like this. $2,600. Total take so far is $37 million for Overboard. Hey, a lot better than I thought I was going to do. I don't know. I don't know what it costs to make, but I feel like it's doing okay. Number 8 this weekend, A Quiet Place is still sticking around. $4 million. Great drop. 37% drop. Did lose 800 theaters, but still in about 2,300 theaters. Per theater average was just about 1,700, so it's under that Mendoza line of 2,000. But you can't complain about this total take so far. $176 million for A Quiet Place in its 7th weekend on a production budget of $17 million. Huge one for everybody involved. One of the better stories this year so far at the box office. Horror is just resurgent. I mean, it's technically a horror thriller, but like it played to the horror audiences. It's just people love to be scared. Number 9 this weekend was Rampage, which is somehow still hanging in there. 1.5 million, 58% drop. Ouch. Lost 1,000 theaters, still in 1,500. Per theater average is approaching $1,000 per theater. Not good. Total take so far for Rampage is $92 million. I've been all over the map on reading this one. It's an underperformance. Not a flop, but it's definitely an underperformance. Number 10 was RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I guess that is right. Documentary, 1.2, almost 1.3 million. Added 196 theaters. Great per theater average for a movie like this. $3,400 in its third weekend. Total take so far just about 4 million. What other documentary about a Supreme Court justice can you remember that did $4 million by its third weekend? Come on. Really great performance there. Obviously playing super well in like New York and Los Angeles and liberal bastions like that. Okay, so that's the top 10. Just outside the top 10, I feel pretty. Super Troopers 2. Super Troopers 2 somehow did 11% jump last week. Maybe because it lost a lot. I don't know what's going on there. Tully not doing well. 75% drop in its third weekend. So what happened there is that Focus Features released it 3 weeks ago. There was probably a contractual obligation to play it for at least 2 weekends in theaters. And the moment that passed, theaters dropped it. And that's why it dropped 75%. It lost half of its theaters this weekend. Huge flop. Didn't expect it to do well, but like kind of lived up to those terrible expectations. 8.4 million total for Tully right now. Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody cannot, I don't know what it is about those two. They had magic with, what the hell was that movie called? I want to call it Polly, but it was called Juno. I don't know why I wanted to call it Polly. I feel bad for him and her, I guess. Like, they just really have not had a hit in forever. This is his fourth flop in a row. The last movie Jason Reitman had that was a hit, Up in the Air, December 2009, almost a decade ago. So I don't know. He's got to switch to TV or something. He doesn't know what's going on in the film world anymore, apparently. I think that's mostly it. 2001: A Space Odyssey was re-released. $50K per theater. Hey, not bad on 4 theaters. Isle of the Dogs is still out on its 9th weekend. Total take so far 30.7 million. That's very underwhelming to me. I thought that Isle of Dogs easily had 50 million in it and just didn't even come close. And it's basically falling off the face of the earth right now. Very good reviews, of course. People who've seen it loved it, but did not connect at all with general audiences. Anything else out there? On Chisel Beach, with how do you say her name? Saoirse? Yeah, I think it's Saoirse Ronan. Rowan? Whoever. You know, the girl from Brooklyn and from Lady Bird, the Irish girl. That opened up from Bleecker Street on 4 theaters. Horrific per theater average. Horrific. $2,285 for a limited release on 4 theaters. Why? This is what I don't understand. Like, I'm not going to go on a rant. I've already ranted enough this episode. But, like, On Chisel Beach is probably a decent film. I heard her on Mark Kermode's show on BBC Radio 5, which if you are interested in film and film reviews, do check out his show on the BBC 5. It's on Sundays. It plays live at like 8 a.m. Central Time. But you can find, just look up Mark Kermode, Kermode, BBC, and all the shows will come up. Really great reviewer, one of my favorite film reviewers. I thought it was okay. Like, it just seems like one of those, you know, it's a drama. It's decent. It has no place being released in theaters. Why would you put it on theaters? It could be so much better suited to a streaming release or like some other service. Streaming. It's a streaming movie. It's not even a VOD movie. Who would watch that on VOD? Who would pay $6 to see that on VOD? Nobody would. It's probably good. It's good content that people would really enjoy, but it's got to be on a streaming service. There's just no real place for that in the multiplex anymore. Multiplex, I sound like I'm 80. Okay, so that's the overall story for the weekend. We're in the middle of summer. It doesn't really feel like the middle of summer. We have Deadpool 2, we have Avengers Infinity War, but the other stuff coming out just doesn't feel like summer movies. That will change as we get into Solo and then Jurassic World. All that stuff's coming out. Let's talk about that really briefly before we end the show. Next weekend, obviously, is Solo, a Star Wars story, from Disney. 4,200 theaters. The feeling right now is 130 to 170. Let's call it 150-ish probably is what tracking's at. I have no idea how this is going to play. I just have no clue. Kind of like Deadpool, I felt pretty confident that it was going to do well and break the 150 mark. I was totally wrong about that. With Solo, because it is Star Wars, what did Rogue One open at? Like 155? That feels too high. Like, with the production problems that were going on with this movie, obviously Lord and Miller were fired. Ron Howard had to be brought in as like a hatchet man to reshoot 80% of the movie. I mean, it's been in the headlines for like the last year how effed up this movie has been in terms of the production side of things. It's coming out way too soon after Last Jedi. I have no idea why they didn't push this back to December. It makes zero sense. And now it's going to get crossfire from Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool 2. It just doesn't make a lot of sense why they're putting this movie out now. I would for certain thought that it was going to had to get pushed. Push it to August. Why not? August is wide open again. Push it to December. December's so overloaded, though. I would have pushed this to August. I don't know why Deadpool 2 or Solo didn't push to August. It doesn't make any sense to me. That being said, it is a Star Wars movie. It is about Han Solo, beloved character. It's got Donald Glover in it, who's like the hottest person in the world right now, with hype. I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like 150 is going to happen. I don't. After Deadpool this weekend, I feel like 130, 120, maybe even lower. Maybe like 112 or something. I don't know. Like I just don't see it doing massively well, just because all those sort of different factors involved. Anyway, we will see what happens next weekend. It's going to be an exciting weekend. Farrell's coming out from IFC. I don't really know that one much about that. It's a tiny little horror film. How to Talk to Girls at Parties from A24 is coming out. That was I think did okay at Sundance. Was it not this year, but last year? The reviews for that are savage. So I don't see that going anywhere. Then we're into June. I feel like running through June just really quickly. Let's run through it. Action Point looks okay. Johnny Knoxville, about a theme park that he opens up. It's actually based on a true story, sort of. I don't know how it's going to do. I'm just going to throw out guesses. $50 million opening weekend? Maybe 40? It doesn't seem like a massive breakout. Probably more 40, 30-ish range. Or maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm misreading the Johnny Knoxville Jackass crowd. Drift does not look very good. SDX. How many movies have we had about people being stranded on a boat recently? It's not going to play well. I'll guarantee you that. June 8th, Hereditary from A24. They're going wide on that one. I don't know. Unless there's like some weird, creepy moment where like everybody's super into like psychological horror films. This is not Split, and this is not It Follows or Get Out. It doesn't feel like that at all. I don't think it's going to do well at all. Ocean's 8 is coming out on June 8th. God, I just started to see the marketing for that. I feel like it's almost too late to start marketing that. I don't know. I would have started marketing that back in April a lot. It feels too close. That's coming out on the 8th, and then we're rolling into June 15th. Incredibles 2 is going to be massive. Superfly, Tag. Tag, I don't really know that much about. Oh, I saw that trailer, yeah. Rated R comedy, of course. Probably going to do okay. And then June 22nd is Jurassic World, limited release under Silver Lake, the follow-up from the It Follows director. It's coming out. Bad reviews, though, on that one. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I have every bone in my body says it's going to underperform massively compared to the first one. I'm thinking like 140, 130 is what I'm thinking. Just insanity. I think I'm going to be right, though. It looks terrible. The first one was awful. Despite the fact that it broke $200 million, you ask people about Jurassic World, they're like, yeah, whatever. I guess it was okay. It's just like everybody showed up to see. Everybody wanted to see it because it was like Hype Town. And then when they saw it and you think back about it, it's like, yeah, it was on HBO recently a lot. And I was like, this is terrible. This is bad. Not a good movie. So I think that's going to have negative effects on the sequel, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, coming out June 22nd. Then the end of June, Sicario Day of Soldado looks fantastic. I saw the trailer today at Deadpool. It looks so good. So I think it's going to do quite well. It just the first trailer for the Sicario sequel looked way too nebulous, and you weren't really sure what it was about. After seeing the plot and this probably the final trailer, it looks fantastic. The Hustle is also coming out on June 29th. Uncle Drew, I don't know what that is. Oh, that's the basketball one coming out also. I think that's going to do really well. I saw the trailer today. It just had a really good reaction from the crowd. It just feels like it's going to do well as I hit the microphone. Okay, so that's it, folks. Takeaways from this episode: Deadpool 2, a little bit of underperformance and expectations. I think just because it's too busy out there with Avengers, and it's going to get much, much worse next weekend when Solo comes out. We will talk about that next weekend. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.